we need to be courageous. We need to teach our children to be courageous. That it's okay to stand and say, this is true.
Welcome to the BJU Press Teacher Edition podcast, where Christian educators are encouraged and inspired as we bring you interviews, practical ideas, strategies, and answer your questions about teaching in today's culture. And here's your host, Jenny Copeland.
Welcome back for this week's episode on the Teacher Edition podcast. It's a privilege to be with you, and I really appreciate you giving of your time to join us. You know, I know this time of year can be a stretch. There's much going on. It's kind of a long stretch between holidays or days off, and I just want to encourage you in your calling. I know it can be stressful, it can be lonely, exhausting, and honestly just plain hard to be an educator at times. But what an incredible calling you have. Seriously, I mean, how many others really have the opportunity to impact young lives every day as you do? I know sometimes it can be hard to see it that way. Maybe you would just like a day away from impacting other people. But I just want you to be reminded that God has placed you right here, right now, and with these students and with these parents too. You know, that wasn't a mistake, and it isn't more than you can handle. You never know how God is working behind the scenes because He is always working, and it's our job to be faithful. We're going to talk a little bit about that today. But just before I introduce our guest for today, I wondered if I could ask a favor of you. If you are enjoying this podcast, would you take a minute to like, follow, and give us a rating on whichever platform you're listening or watching? Your feedback is very helpful to us, yes, but also to others in finding the show. Also, following or subscribing to the show, that's going to help you as well, because it's going to help drop those episodes right there in front of you where you can quickly get at them so you don't miss a single episode with our fantastic guests. Just reach up right now, wherever you are, whatever platform you're listening to or watching on, and click that follow the show button. Don't forget to follow us on social media as well. We're Teacher Edition Podcast on Facebook. By the way, if you're listening to this podcast, don't forget you can jump over to YouTube and catch the video of this interview as well. You can also find us on Instagram and TikTok at Teacher Edition Pod. Lastly, we are still looking for your questions. So we had a few come in a couple months ago, but we're looking for a whole new selection to share on the shows. So if you have something that you're wondering about, maybe a topic you would like us to share something about, or maybe you're just looking for ideas in a certain area, take a minute, go visit our website, teachereditionpodcast.com. You can subscribe to our emails there. You can read more about the podcast, but you can also submit your questions. Remember, these are questions that we will share at the end of an episode if they come in, so you'll want to make sure to check those out. And honestly, it really is just a simple click of the button on our website and you can record your question. So as we get today's episode rolling, let me introduce you to our guest. So I'm excited to have Ben Schettler back with us again today. Ben's the founder and CEO of the Center for Truth in Love. I was introduced to Ben and his work. I have heard him a number of times speak at different conferences and been at different events with him. And for over 15 years, the Center for Truth in Love has been equipping churches to speak the Bible's truth in love to the difficult challenges that are facing our culture. Ben also hosts the Biblical Worldview Show podcast. If you haven't checked that out, you need to do that. And the Truth in Love show. Ben is also an author, and he has some really great materials available. We'll be sure to include a link to their site, on our site, so you as listeners can check that out. Ben and his wife and their adorable little son live in Pensacola, Florida. So Ben isn't a newcomer to the Teacher Edition podcast. He joined us probably about a year or so ago, and we talked about Gen Z. Ben, it's great to have you back on the show. I know you are a hard one to catch up with these days, so I really appreciate you making time to be with us today.
Oh, this is great. I'm so honored that you actually had me and wanted me to come back. I'm shocked.
We did.
Jenny, it's always good to see you, and I'm so grateful for your work on this podcast. And I just want to thank all the teachers out there. I know you did, but our culture wants to memorialize the movie stars and the musicians and some of this. As a teacher, you have some of the most powerful moments and opportunities to shape, change, and mold lives. And it's not as praiseworthy as maybe some of those other professions, but oh, how rewarding it is. And I just want to say thank you to all the teachers out there. It's an honor to be able to talk with you guys today.
Thanks. I echo that. Teachers are definitely the heroes, the unsung heroes, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so Ben, there's a lot that has taken place in our culture, specifically a number of very impacting items since we talked last. And I want to talk about how those are impacting your ministry. But before we do that, talk with us again about what you do. I know some of our listeners will be familiar with what you do, but to many, the Center for Truth and Love might be new to them. And I think it's really important for them to know about that. So as we get into the other topics, they can see the connection there. So what is the Center for Truth and Love?
Yeah, most Christians want to be loving, but they take culture's definition of love and they wind up being silent about certain issues. On the other hand, are the people that do speak, and when they speak, they're so unkind, you wish they would be silent. Well, God hasn't called us to silence. He hasn't called us to unkindness. He's called us to speak truth in love. And so as an organization, we are set up to equip believers, churches, Christian schools, young people, parents, teachers, leaders, to speak truth in love to some of the biggest questions culture has. And, I guess we just need to wrap up our ministry, because in the wake of Charlie Kirk's death and all that's going on in our culture, we don't really need any more truth. There's just peace and love and goodness.
I'm sorry, what country are you from?
Any more truth. So, I guess we could just wrap everything up, right?
Okay, well, that will make for a short episode for sure.
Yeah, opposite. And I was just in New York and at the No Kings protest there in Manhattan. And I can tell you, people need truth, and they need someone that loves them enough to say, hey, here's what is true. And in your classrooms, those students need your love. But it's not a robust and full love if you're just giving emotional sentimentality. Real love has moments where it speaks the truth to your students. So that's what we're all about.
Yeah, that's great. So timely right now. Okay, so I mentioned that a number of impacting events have happened since we last talked. Events that hit very close to home and really have bearing on the work that you do every day. And I'm not necessarily referring to the AWS outage, although that was certainly impacting to some more than others and probably an eye-opener for most of us. But the one that specifically comes to mind was the tragic killing of Charlie Kirk. I know you had a connection to Charlie, and I would love for you to talk about that. But something that I'd like to specifically ask you about is a man that probably most people have never heard of. I know you were able to attend Charlie Kirk's funeral, an event that was just filled with all kinds of very well-known individuals, many of whom were covered in the news media outlets and otherwise. I watched the funeral. There was significant airtime given to those individuals as well. But in the midst of all of those people, you posted a picture of someone likely most people don't even know, Dr. Hertzberg, if I remember correctly. Talk to us about who he is and what's the significance of him and that picture. Why'd you choose it?
I was so honored to be invited by TPUSA to be a part of Charlie's memorial. And I would have been happy to sit in the highest rafter and just honor that man's death. However, they gave me seats, floor passes, that I was just a few feet from the stage, which was very, very special. I'm still humbled to even say that out loud, but it allowed me to meet some really special people. I think one of the most special was a guy named Hertzberg, who is the head of TPUSA education for a different reason. I remember taking a picture with Hutz and sitting there. And so I want to kind of paint the perspective to get to Hutz. To sit in that stadium and look back and see every major news media outlet and more, just like probably over 100 cameras, and then look up and see the state. It was like, there's just people everywhere. And then to know 100 million people watch. And then the content that, like, when we walked in, there's just worship music playing and people are celebrating God and all that he is. It was amazing. And then, so the whole world has paused to praise the King of Kings and Lord of Lords through this man's life. And that blew my mind. How did that happen? And then by the end of the day, it was speaker after speaker. Frank Turek gives the gospel clearly, Rob McCoy. And then you get to some of the leaders of the free world. Don Jr., gives the gospel. Marco Rubio gave one of the best explanations of the gospel in succinct that I've ever heard in a minute and 10 seconds. He's the Secretary of State of the United States. J.D. Vance, Pete Hegseth. And so how was it that the gospel was declared to the world? I believe one of the greatest events in the history of the world. So that takes us to Hutz. Hutz was Charlie Kirk's headmaster. And he's beloved in the TPUSA organization. And in the 5th grade at Hutz's school, Charlie turned from his sins and trusted Jesus as his savior. How does everything I just described happen? Because one man was faithful to lead his school. And as a teacher, you have no idea how powerful your impact is on your 5th grade class or your 1st grade class or your about to graduate 12th grade class. Your impact is so powerful. If Hutz isn't faithful, do 100 million people hear the gospel? Does the Secretary of State give the gospel? Does the Vice President give the gospel? We'll never know because Hutz was faithful. And God can use you in your classroom. Don't miss the opportunity you have every single day to mold the lives of the next generation. And you have no idea how God is going to use them.
Yeah. That's phenomenal. I love that. Okay, so recently at a conference, you were sharing with me the impact that you have seen on your ministry as a result of Charlie Kirk's ministry and his death. We both commented how much we wish this type of awakening could have come without such a tragic loss, for sure. I know you are out there pounding the pavement, connecting with this generation of youth specifically, and really doing a lot, really, of what Charlie was doing as well, pointing people to the truth. I know some of that is doing street interviews. In fact, I think, if I heard right, you were recently in New York City again. I'm quite confident you have some pretty incredible stories from those adventures. Maybe you can share some of those. Maybe even you want to share the wildest thing you've seen in New York City. But what are you seeing out there? As you're talking to this generation, what are you seeing? And I'm connected to that, since this is a podcast for educators, how are you seeing this connecting to the classroom? What's out there right now?
Yeah, so what I saw in a park in New York City has massive implications for your classroom. And let me explain what I mean. And a lot of this is related to the death of Charlie Kirk. What has been happening in our nation is in many ways unprecedented, at least in the last, 4 to 5 decades. You're having atheists who have never opened the Bible go, this man should not have been murdered. And he was all about this book. Right. And going to church. We're seeing a revival. It'll be more concise. We're seeing a revival. We're seeing people go back to church. We're seeing people have never opened a Bible. I had somebody on my social media page go like, hey, I've never read a Bible before. And I sent my boyfriend out to go get me and my daughter a Bible so we could read. And I've never read it before. And she was like, I was more excited. We were supposed to finish watching a movie that night. She was like, I couldn't. I had to look into this book. I had to see what it was about. Like, that stuff is amazing. So that's kind of been my world of where we've been living. I've been all over the country speaking to thousands of people. Our social media has blown up. Like, it's been crazy what we've seen because of that. So I've been in kind of this world of like, look at all this. But one of our big things in our ministry is to get into the public square. And so we had some people that stepped up and said, Ben, the level of you getting into the public square is so necessary. We're going to fund this. And we want to start with you going to New York University in Manhattan. And we were in Washington Square Park, which is kind of the center of New York University. And so we set up our table. I've been to New York on over 80 trips. I've done on the street interviews. I've done this stuff for years. And this was the wildest thing I have ever seen. I repeat, the wildest thing I have ever seen in New York City.
Wait, I thought you said everything's peaceful now. What happened? I think your story changed.
So we're all set up. I'm interviewing this guy, and there's a decent-sized crowd, and this girl comes, jumps on our table, starts dancing. And I just told her, I said, ma'am, please get off our table. God loves you too much for you to behave like this. And she just kept disrupting. And then she finally got off and she got the crowd chanting, "Get out of here." Now, here's what she said. She looked at me. Sorry, I don't. I apologize. I am really tired, and I probably should not have put the Charlie Kirk sign up today. I am missing Charlie today for reasons that I don't want to get into, and so I apologize. But she looked at me and said, "Get this Charlie Kirk garbage out of here." She said, "We don't want right wing. We don't want you here. Leave." And I looked at this crowd and I said, who here is for free speech? Because I truly was in the public square. There's not a more it's like a literal public square or a public rectangle at Washington Square Park. And we had people chanting, "Leave, leave." Then a young man came up and said, "You are a white man and you are not allowed to speak in this park. You must leave because you're white." And what I realized very quickly was it pulled me out of the bubble I'd been in the last 4 weeks of people coming up going like, we've got to move forward. And I realized that downstream of what happened to Charlie, there are two R words: rebellion and revival. There are people that want to diminish his death and basically say he got what he deserved. And the left, there are people on the left that are going headlong into this. They are diving deeper into rebellion. So while we're seeing a lot of revival, on the other hand, and I think it's so important for teachers to realize that at some point you have to stand and speak. You can't be neutral. There are people that God is saving and that God is working through. And yes, whether we like it or not, God worked through somebody that was a political commentator to give the gospel. And I think there are some people that aren't about that. Right. And the reality is it happened. It occurred. So you wrestle with that however you want. But a political commentator saw probably tens of thousands of people saved because of his death. We have to wrestle with that if you're against that. But on the other hand, if you don't stand, you can't stand in the middle because there are people that will push you out of the public square. And what I realize is I think for too long, the church has tried to give the gospel within inside the church. And the church has to go outside the walls, step into the public square, or we will forever lose that opportunity. The reason why these young people behave this way was because they've been in an echo chamber. They're not used to someone giving the gospel. They're not used to saying this. And so if we're just silent, that's a problem. And then I'm going on and on because I know we have some questions coming, but I think I realized in my mind two roads diverged. And when I saw that pandemonium go down, and it was crazy. There was a man there that came. So this girl jumps on the table. This other guy comes, he's wearing a red robe, and he goes, "I am Jesus Christ." Another guy comes, throws chairs at us to get us out of there. And he spoke with a totally non-human voice. Like if you were going to make a movie and use the voice of a demon, that is the exact voice he used. I believe hell broke loose in that park. And we have got Christianity for too long has allowed hell to break loose in the public square. We've got to get back there. And we need to do it in love, because I do think there's those preachers that just stand and yell at people. We need to do it in love. We need to legitimately engage people, just not yell at them while they're walking by, which is what we're doing. But we've got to get back to the public square.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so yeah, obviously we live in interesting days. And I love that you pointed out, because we do think we're hearing all these people going back to church. People are buying Bibles. That's great. But that opposite reaction as well. You said rebellion and revival at the same time. I think it feels like people are a little edgy anyway these days, right? Honestly, I think COVID sped that down the path quite a bit. Yeah. But our current culture just seems to vibrate a good bit all the time about everything. Some people speak out, like Charlie, like you said. Others are really silent but supportive. And you started to kind of talk about that. I know that as Christians, we sometimes tend to not speak out like we should, maybe for fear or for whatever reason. We don't want to be, one of the loud ones, like sometimes, has gotten that negative connotation. So we think, well, we'll just be quieter. We'll just, we'll pray about it, type of, like you mentioned, in the church. So you're one of the ones who are choosing to get out there to speak up. Talk with us about your thoughts on a little bit more about the political and cultural silence versus speaking out. Of course, we know, There is a vital foundation of appropriateness, of being Christ-like, like you said, that love part in our actions and our words. But talk with us about your burden to actually speak out like you're doing.
Yeah, let me say this. It's not evil to love your country. And I think some streams of evangelicalism have kind of created this idea that if we love our nation and we want to see good in our nation, we're being selfish. And it is essential for us to understand that God created the church, that's his creation, it's his bride, that God created the family, that's his institution, and God also created government. It's his creation. And so to have a biblical worldview is to understand that it would be evil for me to say Jesus is the answer to the family, not fathers. That's actually evil, because Jesus's answer to families is fathers and mothers. That's actually his answer. I feel like it's equally evil to say God's answer for government is not the White House, it's not Congress, it's Jesus, when the reality is in the paradigm of God's word, the civil magistrate is an extension of God's power, according to the book of Romans. So for us to say, well, the answer isn't in the White House, it's Jesus, we have misrepresented the truth of Scripture. Now, Jesus is the answer, but Jesus also in his word has given us civil magistrates. And so that said, it is in a nation that's of the people, by the people, for the people, our only responsibility is not just to pray for the civil magistrate. You are the chooser of the magistrate. And in that choosing, there is discussion that needs to occur. There is activism that needs to occur. And for too long, I think many Christians have just said, we'll leave that, I'll go and vote. And at some point, like, the world's not doing that. There was 100,000 people on the streets of New York in the No Kings protest, and they're active. And so Christians, if we do live in a nation that's of the people, by the people, and for the people, we need to act, and we probably need to act more outside the classroom than we do. Teachers are very good in their classrooms, but some teachers, and this is not all, but some teachers lack a lot of boldness when they walk outside that classroom. And it's okay to live your truth outside of it. And we're going to talk about boldness in a second, but I think we also need to raise up a generation in the classroom to be bold. And but at any rate, yes, it's okay to love your country. It's okay to stand in the public square. That's allowed.
Yeah. Okay, so you started talking about the classroom, about Christian schools. Obviously, this is a podcast for Christian school educators, so we're always bringing those episodes back to that setting and to that calling. But honestly, I really think this topic couldn't fit more perfectly. We know that students are most moldable. I mean, adults, there's all those studies about when their worldview, is pretty well settled. We know those are all young ages. They're very impacted. They're very moldable. And honestly, they're the next generation of leaders. And we know that there is little as impacting on a child as education. I believe the COVID years kind of rattled the cages of some people who naively thought that, children just went to school and they did the school thing. No, school is where character is built, where it's being built, where worldview is being shaped, where belief systems and convictions are forming. It isn't just neutral. It isn't benignly checking the requirement of children having to be educated. Education is powerful. It's impacting. You talk a lot about the current generation, about education. Let's talk about what is broken, what's missing. You're out there, you're talking to people, you can see Christian education. What would you say is the lost virtue of the modern education paradigm? Like, boil it down to what are you seeing and what are your thoughts on why that is?
Yeah, so Christian education also installs virtues. And as a teacher, you do that every day. You model virtues by the way that you interact with your classroom. When you talk, I hope when you talk about your spouse, that you model a good marriage. And it is amazing. Those kids are literally in their developmental stages are sponges. Right. You are modeling way more than just the education you're teaching. And I do believe it's probably not, maybe it's not the most we could argue about, right? But certainly one of the more significant virtues that is not being modeled in Christian education and in Christianity as a whole is the virtue of courage. I would even add that courage is often seen as an anti-virtue.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, you know what, Ben? I know you went to the public square, but should you really be at that No Kings protest? Yes, because people are locked in an echo chamber. And if we don't get out to the streets and engage them, we will not be able to give the truth to them. That's exactly where we needed to be. Was exposing, the Bible says, to expose the unfruitful works of darkness. We want people to see that there are literally tens of thousands of people on the streets of New York that want conservatives dead. And they said it. I have the video footage of people saying, we want you dead. In fact, my social media guy had a guy who's like, we want him dead. And he's like, do you want to say that directly to the camera? And the guy like punched the camera. We've got to get onto the street and courage is a virtue. We need to be courageous. We need to teach our children to be courageous. That it's okay to stand and say, this is true. And so it is a virtue, and we need to be reminded of that. And what are you doing in your classroom to model I guarantee you model the virtue of respect. You expect your students to have respect.
Absolutely.
And you're a bad teacher if you let your students get away with too much. There's obviously, but you need to model respect. That's an important virtue. You need to model diligence. You need to model kindness. But what are you doing in your classroom to model courage?
Yeah. Wow. Very good thought. Okay, so wow, we could really go down that path. Like, I feel like we just need a dramatic pause there for a second. Okay, so before we close, kind of along the same thread, I recently heard you speak to a large group of Christian school educators, and you talked about your connection to Charlie Kirk. And while you talked about the tragedy, you also focused on urgency, and that popped out at me when I heard, what you were talking about, and I heard it from others too. Charlie Kirk had an urgency. He didn't know that his days were short. He didn't know how long he had, but it was as if he had a deadline. You had urgency. You were in New York. You're on the streets trying to get the truth out there, get it out there with urgency. He was urgent in his work and his ministry day after day after day. Often as educators, we kind of just get into the routine. We're working through those 180 days, but you had a challenge for those educators. It was a challenge of urgency. And I wondered if you could maybe recreate that here, could share that message with our listeners as we wrap up today.
Well, the Bible says in Romans 1:16 that we cannot be, or Paul declares, he says, I'm not ashamed of the gospel while he's in prison, a place of shame. Christians should not be ashamed because we have the victory. Victors aren't shamed. The gold medalist doesn't get off the platform, look at the camera, and go, I'm so ashamed of my performance. Victors should not be ashamed. Victors cannot be ashamed because we have the hope of the gospel. As Christians, we should go, I'm just so embarrassed. No, we can't be ashamed. Even if someone looks at you and says, you're a fascist. No, I'm not ashamed of the gospel because it's the power of God. But if it is the power of God, we have to stand and speak, and it has gotten a little harder. Charlie Kirk, I was on a text thread with Charlie and with several pastors, and right before he did an interview with Gavin Newsom, he sent me this text. He said, and this was on the thread. He said, headed to see Gavin shortly. Keep it in prayers, please. And then he gets back. He says, it went well. And then he said, he's very slippery, which I thought was funny. And then he said this, I tried to approach it with love and grace and with truth. Very hard. We'll see the final video. If you know anything about Charlie Kirk, a lot of things came easy to him. It doesn't mean he wasn't a hard worker. It was just his work came easy to him because he was so good at so many things. And for him to say one of the hardest things to do is to speak grace and love while also giving truth, that is a hard thing. And we have to be ready to do hard things, and we have to be urgent about it. A few years ago, I was speaking at the Reagan Presidential Library, and the speech was cut short because of a threat of fire. I walked out to the parking lot, got in the car, put the windows down, and we started driving away thinking that the speech was erroneously cut short. Like, I believe there was a fire, but I didn't think there was a fire that threatened the Reagan Presidential Library. And I was a little frustrated. We drove out of the parking lot and around the corner, and there were flames maybe 10 to 20 feet, 10 to 20 yards. I mean, it was super close. Like, there were flames about to burn our car, and the smoke was just built. We could barely see. And I told the driver, I was like, go, we may die. We can't just park here. We will burn up. So we're racing down the hill. The next day they allowed me to finish the speech. And it was interesting. I said to all the educators, and there's a bunch of leaders in the room, I said, how many like me didn't think the threat was real? It was like, you believe the fire was real, but not the threat. And they were like, yeah. I said, what a metaphor for where we're at in our nation. Many of us realize that there is a fire, but we don't realize that the fire is at our front doorstep. And that is what the death of Charlie Kirk, that's what I realized in the park the other day. I didn't realize how much evil there is right at our doorstep. And so that means now is the time to say, I am going to transform the way I live, the way I speak, and the way I teach, and I am going to raise up a new generation of voices. Charlie is gone, but we're going to raise up a group of voices that speaks truth in love, in a compassionate way.
Well said. I love what you said. Victors should not be ashamed. Why are we silent? Like you said, I think that was perfect. No one wins a gold medal and, kind of slides off the back of the podium and disappears. They're victorious. They have much to share. They have much to be excited about. And the threat is real. And I think that's the urgency right there. And like I often say when I'm talking to educators, whether it be about AI or whatever it may be in the classroom, we sometimes think that, well, if I don't speak into it, it's just like nothing will speak into it. No, they are after the hearts and minds of our students. The threat is real. It's right here. So, Ben, that is so sobering. And while our hearts break for the tragic loss of Charlie Kirk, our prayer is that that impact will continue and that many will just wake up and come to Christ and get busy for Christ. Like you said, the need is urgent. Our time with these students is so short. Honestly, we don't know how short. Today is the day to impact them. Ben, thank you so much for taking time to be with us again and for being willing to share all this. It's always such a privilege to have you on the show. And I know you are, like I said, out there pounding the pavement right now. So thanks for giving us a few minutes of your time.
Oh, I'm honored to. If you want to be more connected to our ministry, we have so many resources that can equip you for free right on our website. But also, I'd be happy to send you a book on how to speak truth in love. It's a 14-day devotional guide. And if you'll just text the word prepared to the number 33777, that will get you connected to our organization. We have so many great resources. Also, we have some phenomenal resources about abortion called Love Chooses Life, how to speak truth in love, gospel evidences. Sorry, I know I wasn't allowed to do it, but I wasn't asked to do it, but I'm still sharing gospel evidences. And this one, which is really powerful, called Lies Aren't Love, which deals with LGBTQ issues. These would be amazing resources for you as a teacher to get. But then also for you to use in your school. If you're in the secondary, these are great supplements to chapel or your classroom. And right now we have a promotion going where you can get all 5. We have one on Gen Z as well, where you can get all 5 of these for $100 off. You go to our Worldview thing and it's code Charlie. I can send you a link to put in the comments if you'd like.
That'd be great.
But it's $100. If you get all of them, it's $100 off. And it's a great value if you're interested at all. And I did want to share that. Thank you so much, Jenny, for the opportunity to be on the show.
Yeah. Remind us one more time, they text prepared to 33777. Is that correct?
That is it.
Excellent. And listeners will put those links on our site down here in the show notes so you can check those out. Listeners, thank you also for being with us. I hope you were challenged and encouraged in your calling as an educator. What an incredible opportunity the Lord has given you and has entrusted you with. So as we sign off today, just again, a quick reminder to go check out teachereditionpodcast.com to learn more about this show, all of our episodes as well, and to submit questions for our upcoming episodes. Of course, be sure to subscribe to the podcast and follow us on social media. Now it's time to get back to your day, but it's not just any day. Every day in the classroom is your day to impact and inspire through God's power and through His grace working in you. Now, be urgent in your work and go do what God has called you to do.